Welcome to Discovering the Law. My name is Lucy Rivera. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. Today we have a very special guest. We have Secretary of Public Safety, Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Bennett. Secretary Bennett, it's an honor to have you here today. Please tell us about how you became the Secretary of Public Safety for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well, I received a call that I might be good for that job. And so I got an opportunity to meet with Governor Baker, and I was excited about that. I'd never met a governor before, so I went and met with Governor Baker, and we started talking about some of the things that a Secretary of Public Safety does, and that's took it from there. And we started talking about the Department of Corrections and some of the things we could do differently at the Department of Corrections, and we shared a lot of interest in that area.
Secretary Bennett, what in your career and in your experience, why don't you tell us about yourself and what prepared you for this role?
I think the two most important things were after I went to law school, I had been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney. So a lot of the agencies that public safety covers, the state police, the Department of Corrections, parole, interacts with people who have done criminal defense and who have been prosecutors. So you understand those agencies and how they work, and that's what prepared me. So I understood what the state police were supposed to do. I understood how the Department of Corrections should treat the inmates who are within their custody, and I saw how parole should best take care of those individuals once they leave the corrections system.
As Secretary of Public Safety and Security, you mentioned some agencies that fall under your overview. What other agencies are there, and what do they do? Well,
the Sex Offender Registry Board classifies individuals who have been convicted of sex offenses in the past. And the idea behind that is so people who live in certain neighborhoods across the Commonwealth, if there is somebody who's been convicted of a sex offense and they're still considered a dangerous person in their neighborhood, they'll be able to go online and look that information up. Or they can go down to the police station and find out if someone lives close by them. At the same time, if they apply for certain jobs, working in a daycare center or in a school, they'll be able to check that information out. Another thing is the National Guard, so that you'll be able to oversee the National Guard. That's another area. And another area that seems a little bit off, but actually does fit under public safety, is the Department of Fire Services, which trains all the firefighters in the state. So those are a few of the agencies that I oversee. There's 13 of them.
13 agencies. You mentioned one of them is the Department of Correction.
Yes. So there's two different systems in the state. There's the sheriff's departments, like Sheriff Tompkins, who does a wonderful job inside Suffolk County. And those are for people sentenced to 2.5 years or less in jail. And then there's the Department of Corrections, and that's for people who are sentenced to more than 2.5 years. And the state runs the Department of Corrections, and that agency is underneath public safety.
Very good. Now, Secretary Bennett, you indicated that you were appointed by the governor. What is the mandate under the Governor Baker-Polito administration as far as public safety these days?
Well, I think one of the most important ones actually does relate to the Department of Corrections, and that is to make sure that the individuals who come into the Department of Corrections have an opportunity to change their lives. Because most people who go into the corrections, even though they could face very long sentences, are going to come back out into our towns and neighborhoods. And you want those individuals, if they want to have an opportunity to change their lives. So we try to develop programs that will allow them, if they have an alcohol problem or a drug problem, to get programs. And one of the big things that I discussed that day with Governor Baker that he agrees with is the opportunity to develop a skill, a job. And so that's what we work on. And within our Milford facility, we actually have an automotive center which is training people to get mechanics licenses. And the automotive dealers of Massachusetts came out and viewed it, and every individual from there was offered a job. So people who had spent long-term times in prison are now going to graduate from that program, get parole and be able to be employed as soon as they get out.
And in that vein, there is a term called recidivism. Would you explain to us what that means, and what steps are you taking to address that issue?
Well, recidivism, the idea behind that is if you've been incarcerated, whether it's in the jails or the Department of Corrections, if you come out and within 3 years you commit another crime, that's considered, goes into a statistic on recidivism. The idea behind recidivism is once you are allowed out of the prison system or jail system, you commit another crime that either puts you back in jail or just committed another crime. What we're hoping through the programs is that you don't commit another crime so that you're not a recidivist. Now, that's very difficult with the drug issues that we have throughout the Commonwealth, but that's where we're trying to do the most good. Just give the people who've made mistakes a chance not to commit other crimes. Massachusetts,
you're the head of this public safety and security. You're the head of implementing these programs to prevent recidivism.
Right, that's correct. And so what we did when we looked at the Department of Corrections, we tried to come up with programs that would aid in the most way. As a matter of fact, at Boston Pre-Release, we have a program which is a school inside. So at the school, the inmates, and they're actually students, we consider them students, they spend 1 week working on the computers to get a certificate in Microsoft, and 1 week learning really the basics so that they can get their high set, which is their GED. Then they get college classes. Roxbury Community College has been wonderful. They come in and get the college credits in UMass Boston so that when they graduate, they'll be halfway to an associate's degree, have computer skills, and have developed their GED, and we're hoping. And that makes them less likely to recidivate because they'll have a job when they get out.
Secretary Bennett, how does Massachusetts rank in terms of people who are incarcerated?
We do very well. Of the 50 states, we're 49th. So
49.
it's very, if you're going to live in a state, Massachusetts is the right state to live in. So 49 out of 50 states.
But tell us about that. How is that possible, and why is that? Is that a good thing, or is that something negative?
Well, I consider it a good thing. That means that the programs that have been set up in the past and in present are creating a situation where people are not committing crimes. They're not out there committing crimes as often. And hopefully we're going to keep more and more people out of prison because they're not committing crimes. As a matter of fact, we've closed 2 prisons in the last 2 years. So our population within the Department of Corrections keeps dropping and dropping. So we've been very fortunate in that area. So we want to keep our prison population dropping. It's sort of a mistake. People think that the prison population is going up, but it's actually dropping. And part of that is the programming, and part of that is a more effective way of looking at crime and getting the resources out in the community also, and not just arresting people, but trying to understand what they need out in the community.
Secretary Bennett, when you mentioned closing the prisons, is that what we know as mothballing? Would you talk about that and
Certainly.
Explain that?
What happens, I'll give an example. Bay State Prison was a prison that was out in Norfolk, and what we did was we took a number of the prisoners that were there, and we shifted them to other prisons because then we had room. And when you mothball a prison, what you're doing is you're not tearing it down. What you're doing is just closing it in case the prison population rose again. So you mothball it for a period of time. You do things like make it a transportation center or something else. You don't tear it down. You leave it in case something goes wrong in the future.
And what are two of the facilities that you mentioned that you're closed, and what are you doing with them now?
The other one is MASAC, which is in on the Bridgewater campus. It's another medium security, and we're looking at that one to perhaps in the future make it some type of medical center. The biggest problem we have in corrections right now, in my opinion, is the population is getting older and older, and we're going to have to provide more medical services. We have 150 approximately inmates that are over the age of 70, and like anybody, like any population, you tend to have more medical issues once you get over the age of 70. So we're going to need more and more hospital facilities for the inmates that are reaching that age.
So in that vein, what would you say are the initiatives that you champion, or what are your priorities while you have this appointment, which is a very important appointment?
Within the Department of Corrections, it is to create more and more programs that are going to place the inmates into the pre-release and minimum security facilities, so that before they get out, they have an opportunity to reintegrate themselves into society. So they're not just going from a medium facility which has a fence and wires around it, but a facility where they've had a chance at a job, so they've made some money and they're not walking back out, and a chance to get out on parole so that they had supervision, but at the same time they aren't thrown just to the sidewalk with no one to look after them.
Secretary Bennett, your staff indicated that you had a hobby.
Yeah, that's right.
That you were boxing. You were a boxer.
That's right.
But they didn't say whether you were a professional boxer.
No,
tell us about that.
Well, I think they overplayed that. I boxed in college, and it was enjoyable. And actually, I boxed with the District Attorney of Middlesex County, Jerry Leone, who's no longer there. And it was a great experience, and I learned from it that if you get knocked down, the only thing you can do is just get back up and get back in there, because it doesn't do you any good to lie down on the canvas and not get back up.
Secretary Bennett, in your prominent role, what are your interactions with the governor's office?
Every week we have a cabinet meeting, and the governor and the lieutenant governor have expectations for you. The areas which they have pointed out which are important to them, they expect a report from you. And then at the end of the cabinet meeting, they'll go around and ask you what is important to you, and you give them back that information. There are certain areas where the governor will expect you to be at different events that he's at, or the lieutenant governor, and they expect you to at those events to interact with them or speak in consistent messages which you have with them. So I see the governor at least once a week and talk to him, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a week.
So you can tell us, in the wake of the marathon events, where do you see that? What are the measures that you feel
in the Boston Marathon bombing, or
should be implemented maybe now, today? To make
well, we have a lot of security for the Boston Marathon. The state police and the Boston police work very closely together, and actually the National Guard comes in. We get assistance from them. We get assistance from the FBI, assistance from the Secret Service. And it's one of the safest events that you can have. Now, it's a difficult event to make safe because it's a 26-mile long course. But you have an air wing from the state police, which is helicopters and actually a flyover plane. You have undercover people that are up and down the course that are looking and for different terrorists or someone who might interfere. Right, yeah. So you have as many people as you can get involved to protect that. And every year there's a plan and multiple meetings getting ready for the marathon. And we have an Undersecretary of Homeland Security, one of the 4 undersecretaries, and that's one of the big events he works at.
And does your office work in conjunction with the Undersecretary of
Well, the Undersecretary is one of the 4 that works underneath me,
Okay.
reports to me. So that's one of the areas, Homeland Security, that we have that's another one of the agencies, Homeland Security, underneath.
And it's really interesting, security, public safety and security in the wake of the events in the world today. What do you feel Massachusetts needs to become, is it safe enough or to become safer? Or
Well, we do everything we can to make Massachusetts safe, but I think you can always do better. And we have, between the Boston Police, the FBI, the state police, there's a lot of cooperation along with Secret Service. And I think that if you asked, if anybody went around the country and said who works together well between state, local, and federal, no one could say that anybody works better than they do in Massachusetts. But nowhere can you say you're 100% safe. That type of lone wolf person who is not tied into any organization, but who has some type of other issue, you can never say you're 100% sure.
Secretary Bennett, so we have 2 minutes left on the interview. Would you share with us any lessons or advice in your position? It's fascinating and it's interesting to keep everyone safe in the Commonwealth. It's just dangerous world out there.
I would say that you know, if we all work together and we have respect for each other, it's going to be a lot safer out there for all of us. I think that it's a matter of respecting others and trying to look at the other side and the point of view of other people, so that you think first before you react. And I think that goes for everybody in our society. And if we look at life that way, we're all going to be a lot safer out there.
And Secretary Bennett, how do people reach you, or how do we, if we see something, say something, how is that chain of communication?
Well, see something, say something, I would call 911. Okay. Okay? Because I wouldn't want to, the EOPS, which is the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, that's how you call in to get a hold of us. Okay. But if you see something, say something that causes you an emergency, call 911 at all times. And 911 is also one of our agencies. Oh,
one of your 13 agencies.
One of our 13 agencies.
Secretary Bennett, well, we've run out of time, but it's been our privilege to have you here today. For our viewers today, Secretary of Public Safety and Security Bennett is here. And how long is your term, Secretary Bennett?
Whenever the governor says I'm out of here, I am out of here.
And how long have you been there?
A little over 2 years now.
Do you have to be an attorney to be a...
No, you don't.
But you are.
But I am, yes.
Wonderful, Secretary Bennett. But any last comments or thoughts? We're wrapping up.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for watching us today. We learned a lot about this important guest and the office that he holds. This episode can be viewed at www.discoveringthelaw.com. My name is Lucy Rivera. Thank you for watching.